Hey guys, this is John, and I'm playing GABRIELC in the 15-minute pool in ICC. I was watching Christof's live stream the other day, and he was talking about the Queen's Gambit accepted, which is what I'm going to play here. And he was basically commenting how it's a perfectly good opening, but it's not very popular for some reason. And I completely agree. I've always felt the same way. So I've never played the Queen's Gambit accepted, but in the interests of keeping this channel fresh and introducing opening variety, I'm going to do it. So he played knight f3 on move 3. That's also the move I typically play. It's one of the more conservative ways to approach the Queen's Gambit accepted. e4 would have been sharper on move 3. e3 is another possibility. So this move, knight c3, I wonder if I should take the opportunity to play c6 and then try to play b5 and steer the game into, like, I don't know, semi-Slav waters where I'm trying to hold on to the pawn. That would be interesting. I mean, it could also transpose into a Slav after c6, a4. I wonder what would be the most Queen's Gambit accepted like move here. I mean, my instinct says e6, but if I play e6, he's going to play e4. Maybe then bishop b4, though. I don't know. Hard to say. Well, let's just play e6. Let's see how it turns out. I mean, if he plays e4, bishop b4 looks like a pretty good reply. Threatening knight takes e4. So I think I'm okay with doing that. I could also play e4, b5 is an idea. Which move is better? I mean, if bishop b4, e5, knight d5, might be a decent chance I can hold on to this pawn. Yeah, let's play bishop b4. Looks pretty good. I mean, maybe he can go queen a4 check, knight c6, knight e5. But I have queen takes d4 in that case, and it's going to get super sharp. So he plays queen c2. Maybe b5 now, if I want to try to hold on to this c4 pawn. It's a pretty principled thing to do, and I think I can get away with it. So, yeah, I'm going to play this way. If he plays a4, I can play c6 and support the b5 pawn. I could also play a4, bishop b7, and attack e4, but then he can play d5. I don't like that so much. Plays bishop d2. Maybe just take. If I take, he takes some way, and then I can play bishop to b7. That's looking promising for me. The alternative would be just c6 or maybe a6, but this has the advantage of being very clear. I like the clarity that this offers. So I'll play it. But yeah, the Queen's Gambit accepted. I mean, it's a perfectly playable line. There is a book by, I think, Rizzitano, James Rizzitano, international master, out there on the Queen's Gambit accepted. But other than that, it's just like not a common opening. You just don't really see it at many levels, at any level, really. I mean, all the way up to Grandmaster. It's kind of a niche opening. It's played by only a couple players I can think of at the top level. Sergei Karyakin used to play it a lot. I don't think he really plays it much anymore. So it might be a good occasional weapon. You'd think you'd like taking the pawn on c4, like perhaps the most obvious move after c4 would be a common thing to do, but it's not the case. Okay, what's going on here? He's pinning my knight, but what does he have against bishop takes e4? If I play bishop takes e4, if he takes on f6, I can take on c2. He takes d8, I recapture, and I've won a pawn, an additional pawn. If bishop takes e4, queen takes e4, knight takes e4, it's the same thing. Bishop takes d8, king takes d8, I'm up a pawn. So that only leaves like bishop takes e4, him moving the queen, like say to b2 to attack b5. But I can just take a timeout and defend that pawn, no problem. a6, maybe a4 is a small concern, but I don't think so. Nah, this must be good. Yeah, let's play this way. So maybe bishop g5 was a bit careless by my opponent on the previous move. Let's check GABRIELC's stats while we have a moment. Peak 15-minute rating of 1895, 2,500 15-minute games played. Okay, so we're going to go down this line. I can pre-move this capture. So now I'll be up 2 pawns, plus I'm attacking c3, and c4 is well defended. I mean, he might want to take his chances and play a4 just to upset my b5 pawn. And then if I were to take on c3, at least he could take on b5. But, okay, he's playing knight e5, threatening this pawn. I think king e7 is just a good reply. I see no issues with it, so we'll play it. He could maybe play g3 and try to get on the long diagonal, but if g3, knight takes c3, bishop g2, I can always play knight d5. Okay, so he's playing to upset my pawns. I might just want to play f6 just to force his knight back. I think that's a prudent move. Yeah, because if I were to play c6 here to support the pawn, it is a bit annoying that my knight would be tied down to c6. So let's just go ahead and insert this move. Force him back to f3 or to g4, and then I'll decide what to do. I'll probably play c6. Because I like keeping this pawn on b5, which means keeping the pawn on c4. Nicely protected as well. There's not a good way for him to undermine this b5 pawn any further. We even have a6 as a backup if he plays, like, I don't know, take and rook a5 or something. Well, even in that case, I could take on c3. I don't think knight c3 on move 4 in itself is that bad, but definitely his follow-ups were kind of suspect. I think he maybe should have taken a little more time after it became clear I was going to try to hold on to the pawn with b5. And maybe even slightly before then, too, because I'm sure he was in new territory. Pretty big rating disparity in this one. Playing at about 2:15 p.m., 2:15 in the afternoon, Central Standard Time, and had to wait a long time for a game, so that's just the way it goes sometimes. I would like to play higher rated players, but you know, I just have limited time to record these videos. So I enter the pool, and whoever I get, I play, basically. In the future, I may look into playing like prearranged matches with people, possibly not even like the main chess YouTube commentators, like Christof and Greg Shahade, Nicholas Hushenbeth, those guys. I mean like people that are just friends of mine that are title players, IMs, GMs, like see if they'd be up for playing it. Because it would be nice to get some games in with very high-rated players. But then again, these games against low-rated players are useful too, because the games that illustrate the most instructive things in chess are usually played when there's a rating gap of a few hundred points. Okay, so rook a3 defends the pawn on c3. I think I'll just play knight d7. Yeah, let's go knight d7. Just complete our development. There's no rush. It'd be nice to play a5 and then prepare b4. So that's kind of what I'm looking at now. Yeah, we can definitely play a5. There's nothing stopping us. We're just on the verge of overrunning him already with our passed pawns. I mean, I think bishop g5 on move 9 is essentially a losing move. Maybe he can like avoid the trade of queens and somehow generate play, but it's bleak. It's very bleak. Okay, so here, should I play like knight b6 and make him take me on b5, or should I just play b4 and barrel ahead with our pawns? I think I like the b4 option. Yeah, our pawns are so strong after this. Let's pre-move this capture. We've got two connectors on the 4th rank. His a4 pawn is weak. He is attacking c4, but we can push c3 or b3 next move, or even play knight b6 if I want to maintain the pawn on c4. If rook e3, I have knight d6, holding the c4 pawn and retreating the attack knight, so that's no problem. I probably should have mentioned that, though, before I played b4, that I do have this resource. Oh, he's going to make us utilize it. So now a4 is undefended. I can try to grab that pawn on the next move. If he plays d5, I can just take it with my c-pawn, and then knight d4, maybe knight c5 thereafter. He could go knight c6 and try to go win the b4 pawn, but I'm up too much material. Okay, so here I'm thinking just knight b6. I like the look of this move. It reinforces c4. it attacks a4, and it also threatens knight d5. So there's a trifecta of reasons to prefer knight b6 right now. So we'll go ahead and play it. d5 is a great square for this knight. And his rook is already looking embarrassed for squares. Probably he has to play like bishop d1 right now to hold the a4 pawn and give his rook a proper retreat. Yeah, because now he's just going to lose more material. His rook is trapped. I wouldn't be surprised if he resigns now. Yeah, and he does. Okay. So very quick and one-sided game. Let's take a look at it. So the Queen's Gambit accepted. There's a couple ways it can be reached. And some players play knight f3 first, and a QGA player would just play knight f6 against that. And after c4, like then take the pawn. The way we played it, most common move order, just c4 directly, and then pawn takes. And now here there's basically three main moves for white. There's knight f3, there's e3, and there's e4, with e4 being certainly the most aggressive move. After e4, I think knight f6 is like the theoretical recommendation to attack the pawn and try to force it to move up. And you get this d5 square. White will recover the pawn and enjoys a slight space advantage, but it kind of resembles an Alekhine in that Alekine's defense in that white's pawns have been enticed forward and they do create some weaknesses left behind. It's kind of like a c3 Sicilian too. Black has this nice d5 square to use as an anchor for that knight. It's also possible, I think, to play e5 in this position. And then the line goes, the point of e5 is that if white takes, we can trade here, and then I think play just knight c6 and counterattack e5. So I believe there's a line that goes e5, knight f3, e takes d4, and now bishop takes c4. And black can try to be greedy and hold on to the pawn, but white can whip up an attack pretty quick on f7. So generally it's like not advised for black to play this way. So e4, if the Queen's Gambit accepted is going to be refuted, it's probably going to be because of that move. But I know even though white scores well in this line, it's not like outside the bounds of a normal opening, normal expectation out of the opening for black by any means. So there's e3 and there's knight f3. I know Boris Avruk recommended e3 in his Grandmaster Repertoire d4 book for white. In my mind, the only downside of e3, trying to regain the pawn right away, is that e5 could be played. The same idea, like trying to get white to take so you can trade queens and then play knight c6 and go for counterplay. So that's why I and my opponent prefer knight f3. Well, I don't want to speak for him, but that's why I like knight f3. It's because it rules out e5, and it shows that white's not really concerned about like getting this pawn back, because this pawn can be recovered if white wants to. It's too dangerous for black to try to support it with a move like b5 right away. And in fact, like a trap that you should be aware of is, let's say white did play e3. This is a trap that many of you will know. If black plays b5, trying to defend the pawn, then white wants to undermine the base of the chain. Again, if you think of a pawn chain as a tree, you want to chop down the tree from the bottom traditionally. That's where it's most vulnerable to collapse. So a4, attacking the b5 pawn. Now, if you were to play a6, then just a takes b5, and black cannot capture because of rook takes a8. So if black wants to reinforce this pawn, c6 makes the most sense. But then again, a takes b5, and after c takes b5, what can white play? You can pause your video if you haven't seen this and want to try to figure it out. White to move and win. Okay, the move is queen f3. And it turns out this rook has no safe square to go to, nor can it be defended. So black would have to play knight c6 if they want to struggle on, but they're just going to be down a piece after this. An easy win for white. So that shows the pitfalls of trying to just support this pawn kind of blindly and just push your pawns up to defend it. And that also explains why white is like not concerned about taking an extra tempo for development before going after that c4 pawn. So going back to the game, my opponent played knight f3. I played knight f6. He went knight c3. Yeah, I'm much more used to e3. And after e3, I was just going to play e6, bishop takes, and then c5. And black will usually aim to play a6, and if allowed, b5 thereafter. But usually white will do something with the move order to discourage black from playing b5. A lot of times Queen's Gambit accepted positions produce IQP middle games, isolated queen's pawn middle games. So say in the event of like castles, let's say a6, and then like bishop b3 is one move that I play here. From the white side, knight c6 here. Black can take, and then try to hope to exploit this pawn later on. And these positions are dynamic, and they can be interesting to play for both sides. Like white has a weakness in the center, but they have more space and open lines. This bishop can come out to g5. Rook to e1 is possible. A lot of times white can try to get in the d5 move. In fact, there was a bullet game I played the other day in the Queen's Gambit Accepted where I was able to play d5, but it didn't really lead to any advantage. There was just a bunch of trades. So that's kind of the hallmark of the Queen's Gambit Accepted, at least in some of these traditional lines, is like white having an IQP and black trying to exploit that. Later, black might play knight b4 to d5 to try to blockade the square immediately in front of the IQP. That's a standard thing to do. But my opponent played knight c3, and I should probably know what to do against this move, but it just seems to me like black has options. Like I could play c6. This would transpose to a Slav, like just directly. c6, and if he plays a4, bishop f5, or right in a mainline Slav. But I wanted to keep some unique flavor in the position, so e6. I'm giving him a chance to play e3 again, and we would transpose into that variation, like e3, c5, bishop takes c4, knight c6, a6, etc. So he instead played e4, and I'm going to start the engine right here. Because I was satisfied with bishop b4, but there might be other options too. I do like this move. I was wondering about bishop takes c4, knight takes e4, and now queen a4 check. Knight c6. I would suppose that this is bad in view of, okay, I can just take here. Well, that solves that question. Hitting the queen, and then b takes c3, check. Bishop takes c3, fork the king and rook. Yeah, that's over. So maybe it's a little bit too dangerous for him to do that. I thought I remembered a line that goes like, bishop takes c4, knight takes c4, and then just castle. I think this is a variation too. Yeah, I've seen some games in this line, actually, where white like offers to sacrifice another pawn, but if black wants to take that pawn, it's going to be pretty disastrous for the development. This is kind of like a Joko piano, almost. Like black's snatching some pawns, but at the expense of development, and also a very awkward bishop. So I think black's supposed to like drop something back to f6, like maybe knight f6, or take on c3 and then play bishop e7. I can't quite recall. Not an expert in this line. But he played queen c2. I went b5. Yeah, and I think white should probably throw in a4. This is probably the best idea. To try to undermine my b5 pawn, maybe make me play c6 and block this diagonal straight away. As played, he went bishop d2. I don't like that move because it's a little static. Like the bishop doesn't want to be here for the rest of the game anyways. So you should just keep it flexible. I wasn't planning on taking on c3, but now that he's broken the pin, he is threatening knight takes b5. So I just take, and then I get to play bishop b7, and I like the fact that I haven't been forced to close this diagonal. And he should probably play e5 here, I think, and go with this position, but it looks like black is better. Yeah, knight e4 is possible. I think knight d5 is also probably fine. The computer much prefers knight e4, interestingly, hitting the bishop. Yeah. So he played bishop g5, but I saw no reason not to play bishop takes e4. I think it was just a miscalculation by him. Yeah, and he should probably play queen b2 to attack this pawn, but I was looking at lines like take, and if queen takes b5, I can play bishop c6. So g takes f3, and then maybe queen d5, I was thinking. Hitting this bishop, hitting the f3 pawn, and defending b5. And you can see the eval, it's very comfortable for black. There's probably other moves too, like c6 is fine, apparently. White shouldn't have a compensation. But he took, and yeah, the simplifications do not help him. He's down 2 pawns now, c3 is weak. He still hasn't completed his development. I thought he might try g3 just to try to go bishop g2, but again, I can take and then scurry back with the knight and protect my rook in the corner. There's too many pawns. Black's already holding a decisive advantage here. So f6, I just repelled his knight. c6, and I'm not really thinking about anything grandiose here. I'm not trying to win quickly. I'm just trying to complete my development. I like it when my rooks are connected. He still has to complete his own development. And yeah, we can already play a5, and b4 is virtually unstoppable. And rook e3, we drop the knight back to d6, defending the pawn. Yeah, and I mean, outwardly, he blundered at the end. probably should have preferred bishop to d1 or something to defend this pawn, and a knight d5 be able to drop the rook back, but it's too much. I mean, these pawns are going to carry the day. e3 is a good move. Advancing the pawns on the same color as his bishop. a4, I could practically just win a4 whenever I want. It's just a bloodbath. So, yep, he got his rook trapped and then resigned. So I'm going to try to play more of these Queen's Gambit accepted games for black, because I think it's interesting. And yeah, we'll see what happens with it. Maybe it could turn into an occasional OTB weapon for me, perhaps. Because I really don't think a lot of d4 players as white are like studying the Queen's Gambit, just because that reflects the little popularity that the opening has. I mean, if people aren't playing it, you're not going to spend time studying it. Just like you wouldn't spend time studying like some obscure opening that you're not likely to face. So thank you guys for watching. I'll be back tomorrow with another standard game. Talk to you guys later. Bye.